Okay, so we're going to be looking at four.
So
The first question should be this skeletal system question. Where we're going to look at all the different types of joints. Okay, so um, as you're pulling that up, I'll just explain. So what we're talking about here is a synovial joint. Okay, so what a synovial joint means, if you remember from last week, is that's a joint that is freely moving in our body. So all the joints that provide movement in our body, they are what we call synovial joints. And the reason why they're called synovial joints is because they have a capsule around the joint. Okay, so if I cut open the skin around your knees and the muscles, and I got down to the joint, there'd be a capsule around it. Then if we cut that capsule, on the inside is all the ligaments and the bursa and the meniscus, but also there's this fluid in there called synovial fluid. And that's kind of like lubricating oil, like WD-40 in your joints, yeah? So synovial joints contain synovial fluid, which is why when you injure a joint, they tend to blow up and swell up, yeah? Because all that synovial fluid gets really affected and inflamed. Okay, so the first joint you can see there is in the top of the neck. Okay, so that's between the C1 and C2 vertebrae. Okay, so C means cervical. Okay, so cervical is the top vertebrae in your neck. You've got 7 vertebrae in your neck. So we're looking at C1 and C2. They're the first two. They're called the atlas and the axis. Okay, so the atlas revolves around the axis. So that's what allows your head to turn from side to side. That's the first two vertebrae, C1 and C2. Okay.
are we writing in there, mate?
Yeah. So we would call the joint. You can call it the atlas and axis joint, or between the C1 and C2 vertebrae. Okay. Try not to write neck. Right. So atlas and axis. Atlas and axis are the name of the two bones. Okay. And that is a pivot joint. Okay. So a pivot joint allows rotation. Right? So that allows us to turn our head from side to side. So it's not the vertebrae at the bottom. The vertebrae in the middle, they allow our neck to tilt from side to side, but the ones at the top allow our neck to turn from side to side. So that's called a pivot joint. Okay. The second one, guys, is obviously the hip joint. Okay. And the hip joint is what we classify as a ball and socket joint. Okay. So what's the other ball and socket joint in our body? Apart from the hip, yeah, the shoulder, right? So they're very similar. If you think about it, like if you think about us when we were primates, when we were gorillas and we used to walk around on all fours, we'd walk around on our hands and our leg and our feet, right? So that's why those two joints would have to be the same. So ball and socket joints allow for large amounts of movement, but the trade-off is they're not very stable. Now the hip's a lot more stable than the shoulder, because the hip has to absorb a lot of force, yeah, from walking and gravity and everyday stuff, okay? So the hip is a ball and socket joint. Number 3 is the elbow. Guys, without looking at the notes, what type of joint is an elbow? Logan, do you know?
Can I just hinge?
It's a hinge joint. So, mate, what a hinge joint does, it just allows for movement in 2 directions. So, obviously, for an elbow, it's flexion and extension, like the hinges of a door that open. Yeah. Okay. So that's that. So it's a hinge joint. So the only thing that the elbow does, it allows flexion and extension. Now, some people go to me, well, I can get my elbow and I can turn it like this. I can actually rotate my elbow, right? But as you've actually got a second joint in the bottom of your elbow that rotates as well. But the classic elbow joint, it just flexes like a bicep curl or like a tricep extension. Okay.
Okay.
The fourth joint is a wrist. Okay. It's a very fancy name of a joint. It's called a condyloid joint. And that's just basically another name for a really shallow ball and socket joint. So the wrist can move in a lot of different directions. Yeah. Flexion, extension, side to side, rotation. So it's almost like a really shallow sort of cup joint, and it kind of glides like this. Okay, so that's the wrist. Okay, so the fifth joint is, well, it is the thumb joint, right? But it's between, if you read here, it's between the trapezium and the carpal and the first metacarpal bone. So they're just 3 bones that connect in your finger that create the thumb joint, right? And you can probably even write thumb joint actually for that one. And that is what we call a saddle joint. So the difference with a saddle joint, if you think about your thumb, is your thumb can move forward and back, and it could also move from side to side. Yeah. So that's that type of joint that looks like a saddle, right? And then a combination of those two allow your thumb to go around in circles. So that's called a saddle joint. Okay. And the last one is just between your tarsal bones. So they're in your feet, and they're what we call gliding joints. Okay. So the joints just kind of glide on each other. They don't really hinge. They just kind of glide back and forth and side to side. Okay. So there's 6 major types of joints in our body. Okay. But, you know, we're usually more concerned with like the hinge joints and the ball and socket joints there. Okay. So 6 different types of joints, and we've got them all listed there. Okay. Are we all good to move on?
Yep.
Sweet. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the 3 different types of stretching. All right. So we've got 3 different types, and you guys should all be aware of this. We've got static stretching, we've got dynamic stretching, and the last one's called PNF stretching, which I'll explain in a little bit. So static stretching is your basic static stretch. So you're just holding a stretch for a determined period of time, right? In an attempt to lengthen the muscle, lengthen the tendons, etc. Okay, so some of the benefits, obviously, of static stretching is you can hold a position for long periods of time. Yeah, so you can really get into a stretch and improve muscle length. And also, static stretching is very useful for recovery after a workout. Yeah. Okay. So we typically do static stretching after a workout. But if you can see there on the second one, dynamic stretching, we always do dynamic stretching before a workout. Does that make sense? You guys should probably be aware of that through footy and stuff, right? So dynamic stretching like arm circles and leg swings and stuff like that, we do before the workout because that prepares the joints and the movement patterns for activity. Okay. They've actually done studies and they've found that if you do a lot of static stretching before a workout, right? So for example, if you stretch your pecs and you just like hold a chest stretch, you do it for like a minute, right? And then you try and go bench press. By stretching that muscle for long periods of time, you decrease its ability to contract forcefully, right? So they've done studies that show that static stretching pre-workout actually decreases force output during the workout, right? So that's why we always do dynamic stretching before, but static stretching is most useful afterwards. Okay. Does that make sense, James? You kind of get that concept of like dynamic before and static afterwards, yeah?
Mate, it's fundamentally whenever I exercise, I feel that, you know.
Yeah.
And I've done a fair bit of ROMWOD stuff, and
Yeah.
it's made very long holds. And when you come out of the holds, you feel limp. You wouldn't be able to push anything heavy or do anything that's high intensity.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But for years and years, in the early days of the fitness industry, we got it the wrong way around. We thought it was all static stretching before a workout. You know what I mean? Right? Yeah. So, so definitely dynamic before and definitely static afterwards, okay? But static can be done. It can be done cold. It can be done any time of the day. It's fine. It's just don't try and do anything really forceful or really powerful after a long static stretch, yeah? As you can see, the risk with both is pretty much the same. If you're taken too far past a comfortable range of motion, you can injure yourself, right? And with dynamic, we usually perform dynamic warm-ups after we've raised our body temperature and after we've got the blood circulating, right? So if we think about a proper warm-up, the first portion of a proper warm-up should be some sort of aerobic element, yeah? It could be a jog, it could be a row, an echo bike, a ski, something like that, yeah? So we get ourselves warmed up first, we get the blood circulation, then we go into the dynamic stretches, okay? So they're obviously some of the risks of those, okay? And then do you guys know much about PNF stretching?
No.
It's that, I'm sure you've probably done it through football before. It's usually a partner assisted stretch where the partner will say, grab your leg and they'll put you into a hamstring stretch and they'll take you right to the end. And then what you'll do is you'll squeeze and you'll contract the muscle and then you'll relax the muscle and your partner will push you just a little bit further. Yeah. Have you done that before, James? You done that PNF stretching before?
Yeah.
Yeah. Stretch, contract, relax sort of stuff. Yeah.
Particularly good in the bedroom.
most particularly good. So yeah, so some of the best things with PNF stretching is what you're actually doing is you're actually almost like releasing the nervous system and allowing the muscles to lengthen, right? So it's one of the best ways to actually get permanent changes to your flexibility. So a lot of PNF stretching is great for permanent changes in flexibility. Because a lot of your flexibility, would you believe, guys, it's tied to your nervous system, right? So your nervous system will always be sending signals telling your muscles, oh, this is too tight, this is too far, I don't want to go any further. Classic example is you can watch videos of what they do is they can put you on a general anesthetic, right? And they knock you out completely. And they could move your body in ways that you could not believe, right? If you're awake, because your nervous system's completely switched off. They deal with people that have frozen shoulder, and they'll put them under general anesthetic, and they'll get their arm and they'll move it into all these sorts of crazy directions and kind of pop it and crack it and break up all the scar tissue because the nervous system isn't there to kind of act as a limiter, right? So PNF stretching can cause permanent changes in resting muscle and tendon length. It lengthens the muscles, it lengthens the tendons, and obviously some of the risks or the downfalls is you usually need a partner to do it properly, and like we said, you lose strength. So you don't do a lot of PNF stretching and then go do a workout. It's something you do by itself, or it's something you do after a workout. Okay, so they're the three major types of stretching: static post, dynamic pre. We all good with that one, guys?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, sweet. All right, so now we're going to talk about some of this. Okay, so we're going to have a look at some scenarios of training. We should know a little bit of this already. Okay. And we're outlining some of the responses to the body. And I'm really big, guys, on understanding the physiology of the body. So what I want to try and get through to you guys is like, what does exercise do for each system in the body? What does it do for the heart? What does it do for the lungs? What does it do for your temperature, your bone density? So these are all the concepts that are really important, okay? So the first one, environmental conditions, right? So training in hot or cold environments, okay? So obviously, if you're training in a hot environment, one of the first things that's going to happen is the blood vessels are going to open up, right? So that's called vasodilation, okay? So the reason why the blood vessels open up is to get more blood to the surface of the skin so that your body can sweat and cool the blood down, right? So that's why you increase sweating. And by opening up your blood vessels, your heart rate's going to increase as well. Okay, so training in extremely hot environments, as you guys are aware, you're going to have more blood vessels opening up, you're going to be sweating a lot more, your heart rate's going to be up, your temperature's going to be up. That makes sense.
Yep.
Right? And that's actually conducive for exercise performance, right? Because we want our blood vessels open up, which is why we warm up, right? The whole concept of a warm up is to physically warm up the body, warm up the blood, open up the blood vessels. Okay. Now, what is the opposite? The opposite is in extreme cold environments. So in extreme cold environments, you get something called vasoconstriction, which is the opposite. Yeah. So the blood vessels get really narrow. Okay. So does anyone have any idea why our blood vessels constrict in cold environments?
Energy.
Yeah.
Save energy.
Yeah. And what it does, it'll allow. So if you're in an extremely cold environment, it will take blood flow away from the extremities, hands and feet and legs and arms, and it'll take it back to the organs to try and warm up the organs and prevent you dying, essentially, right? So the blood vessels constrict, and obviously we shiver. Now, what is shivering? What does it do?
Warming the body. Attempting to warm the body.
How? But like how does it warm the body?
Contracting muscles.
Mm-hmm.
Contraction of muscles that obviously moves blood flow around to then generate heat.
Perfect. That is a textbook answer, James. So it's literally, that's what it is. So it's involuntary muscle contractions. That's what shivering is. And when we contract muscles, we generate heat. So that's just the body's way of trying to raise body temperature. Okay. So remember, guys, the body is always trying to maintain a normal temperature. Okay. We call that, in exercise physiology, we call it homeostasis, normal temperature, 36.5 degrees or whatever, right? So when our body temperature goes up, we're trying to bring it down. When our body temperature goes down, we're trying to bring it up. Keep in mind, both of those things always require more energy, more calories, right? So training in extreme environments, extreme cold and extreme hot, will always burn more energy and more calories than training in a normal environment. Okay, that's really important to understand. Okay, training in extreme cold environments, you burn so many more calories because your body's having to work so much harder for the same output to maintain energy. Okay. All right. So here's the second one, guys. What does a single bout of exercise have on energy levels? Okay, you know, you feel great after a workout. Yeah, what is that? Like if a client asks you, Logan, if they go like, why do I feel so good and so energized after a workout? What is it?
Well, it's the release of endorphins, isn't it?
That's exactly right. So that's what we want to be really focusing on, explaining that to our clients. Yeah. So what a single bout of exercise has on energy levels is it releases endorphins. Okay. Namely, the two major ones are serotonin and dopamine. Okay. S and D. All right. That's what we want. So that leads to an improvement in energy levels. And I wrote moose, but I actually meant mood. Right. And that's the concept of the runner's high. And we all know it, right? So I think, Logan, for you, running your gym, if you've got new clients, if you're doing groups and stuff, what I always say, the most important thing to do is say to people, focus on how exercise makes you feel before you focus on how it makes you look. Yeah?
Okay. Yep.
Because if you keep focusing on how it makes you feel, I feel great after a workout, my energy levels are up for the rest of the day, I'm happier, you know, I'm in a better mood, they're going to want to keep coming back. And it's only through the consistency that's when they get the results. If people are focused on, well, how come I'm not lifting this much already, or how come I haven't lost this much weight, they're missing the point, right? Focus on how it makes you feel first, then you'll be consistent, then you'll get the progress, okay? So these are, you know, things we always want to explain to our client as benefits.
I don't know. It sort of goes the other way for me too.
Explain that.
Like if I don't do a workout or something within a couple of days, I'll be like climbing the walls.
100%. 100%.
Start to feel anxious, like a bit stressed, get tense in the body.
Oh, mate, I couldn't agree with you more. I feel exactly the same way. And, you know, that's probably a positive adaptation to exercise, but essentially what you're missing the release of those endorphins. You know what I mean? Like that's because you're getting that every time you exercise, especially if you push yourself really hard, right? So you just end up missing it. It's almost like an addiction. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, you go without caffeine for 24 hours, you have a headache. So it's the same concept. Yeah. Okay.
Never done it, mate. Wouldn't have a clue.
Oh, about going without caffeine?
Caffeine, yeah.
I try and do it once a year, hey, because I start like here and then I end up drinking more and more and more and more a day. And then I've got to break myself because I just drink too much. And then for a week, I feel like the first 2 days is shit. Then I feel great. Then I'm like, I'm never drinking coffee again. And then then it comes back. But
how long does it take, you reckon? A couple of days?
The first 2 days are bad. It's like anything. It's like if you're trying to go like keto or whatever. Like it's like the first 2 days of any massive change are really difficult. The headaches are just gnarly. But once you get through that, you actually feel really, really good. Really good. Okay. And then you have the benefit of resetting your caffeine tolerance, which means, you know, a normal amount of coffee gets you going again, which is always good as well. So anyway, okay, so training in different heart rate zones. Okay, so what happens here? So we talked a little bit about this last week with the training zones, zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we'll just have a look at two basic zones here. So the first one is anything between 50 to 70% of your max heart rate. We call this aerobic zone. Okay, and the acronym that I use for this is, and you'll hear this sometimes with like endurance athletes, is LISS, LISS. So that's the opposite of HIIT. You've heard of HIIT, guys, yeah? High intensity interval training. LISS is the opposite. LISS is low intensity steady state. So that is low intensity exercise, steady, long periods of time. Think about going for a run or going for a walk or a long cycle. Yeah? We call that LISS. Okay? And it does have its place because what it does do, it improves your cardiovascular capacity. It improves your blood circulation, improves your long-term resting heart rate and blood pressure. So it's good for health, right? So, you know, like some people don't, you know, technically have to train super hard all the time, and it's nice to break up hard training, that anaerobic training, with some of the low intensity steady state stuff, right? So that could be like getting your clients to go out for a walk once a day or trying to hit their 10,000 steps a day or whatever, right? That's the aerobic zone. So it's very good for health, right? Doesn't do heaps for performance, right? But it's very good for health. And then as you can see, guys, the next one is anything from 80% or 70 to 80% and up. Yeah, we call that the anaerobic zone. So that's sort of interval training, sprint training, HIIT training, as we know, high intensity interval training. And some of the major benefits there is we improve our force and strength output. And then the second one, which I keep talking about, guys, is we improve our lactate tolerance. So the body's ability to tolerate more and more lactic acid, okay? before we slow down, and buffering. So what buffering means is we clear it out of our system. Okay? So that's what we want to get good at. We want to be able to tolerate a lot of lactic acid, a lot of pain, a lot of burning in our muscles, but we want to be able to recover really fast so that we can go again. And like, think about a rugby league play. That's like probably the most important thing, right? It's repeat efforts at high intensity. Okay? So we've got to train at that uncomfortable lactic acid, sort of lactic tolerance zone. Right?
Yep.
You watch those guys do the CrossFit Games and all that sort of stuff and all those crazy workouts. And it's basically what they're trying to figure out is for each workout is how close can I stay to the red line without going over the red line, right? Because they know as soon as they go over it, they're going to die in the ass, right? So we're trying to push that red line higher and higher and higher and higher. All right. And the last one, guys, is bone density. Okay. So changes in, what does it say here? Changes in bone something. Long-term changes in bone health. Yep. So as we know, we're going to get improved bone mineral density through exercise, okay, due to the muscle acting on the bone. So think about it. Every time you do an exercise with a weight, let's say you do a bicep curl, right? The bicep tendon has to pull on the arm muscle to lift the arm, right? So every time that tendon pulls on the bone is going to respond to that pulling by getting stronger. Okay, so that's how we improve bone density. The more muscle we use, the more bone we build, because the muscle pulls on the bone. And the bone goes, right, if you're going to keep pulling on me, I got to get stronger. Okay, so improved bone density, again, guys, very important for older people, very important for people with osteoporosis, a family history of all that sort of stuff. You know, if you've got parents that have fallen and fractured hips or have had hip replacements and knee replacements, you want to make sure that you're strength training. And one of the first mistakes I see with a lot of old people when they exercise is they don't do strength training. You know, you see old people do like aquarobics in a pool, right? And I'm like, well, that's okay, but what's the problem with exercising in a pool?
Drowning.
Apart from drowning.
It's got no shearing, no force.
Well, yeah, because they're weightless, right? So gravity isn't acting on their body, right? So if they're doing a squat in a pool, what are they doing? They're not doing anything. Whereas if I put a bar on your back, I've got gravity plus load acting on your back, forcing your bones to get stronger, right? So old people need to strength train. They're probably the most important thing that they do, more than even like doing cardio stuff. They've got to get stronger, get their bones and tendons stronger. And then the second thing with that is it decreases their risk of falls and fractures, right? If you're in your 70s and you fall, it's never good, is it? It's broken hips, it's broken arms, it's, you know, a decrease in function, you know, things tend to go really bad downhill from there, right? So you don't want old people falling over. Alrighty, how do we go with that one, guys?
Sweet.
Awesome. James, all good?
All good, mate.
Okay, let's move on. Okay. Discuss the concept of delayed onset muscle soreness, okay, and potential techniques to reduce the severity of DOMS, okay? So I'll get you to explain this, Logan, first of all. What is DOMS? How do you explain it to your people coming to your group classes?
How would I or how do I?
Yeah, how do I? Oh, I'm so sore. What is that? What's going on, you know?
It's just train. Like most of the people that come to our gym sort of are amateurs and haven't really done much in a gym before. So it's their body just getting used to all those movements and taking their bodies places it hasn't been before.
Yep, most definitely. Yeah. So as you can see, one of my first bullet points there is unfamiliar exercises. Yeah.
Yep.
If you're taking your clients through, and that can be two things. It can be unfamiliar movement patterns, and it can also obviously be unfamiliar loads, things that you're much heavier than what you've done in the past.
Yep.
Right. So both of those things are going to cause that DOMS. Yeah. Do you have anything to add on how to explain DOMS to a client, James?
Oh, man, I wouldn't personally, apart from the fact just saying that it's a breaking down of muscle tissue and it's through. When you do that, it's going to cause a feeling in the body that you mightn't be used to if you've done things that you haven't done before. So,
yep.
Good sign that, as long as it's not too bad, of course, but as long as if you're getting that, then you're obviously pushing your body further than what it's used to being, which means it can repair and move on from there.
Yeah, exactly. Because that concept of forcing the body to adapt is vital, right? Because that's all that the human body wants to do with exercise is you give it a stress, it adapts to that stress. So next time you give it the stress, it can handle it, right? So one of the most important strength and conditioning concepts is progressive overload, progressively making things harder and harder over time so that the body doesn't adapt very quickly, okay? And that's why you're going to see DOMs, right? So that's what it is.
Just on that, sorry, mate, just on that, is there one thing I'm not really that familiar with is like cycling.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of like, that progressive overload, so if you're going to go sort of hard all the time, like I have a real problem with my personal training. I don't really know what I'm going to do usually until I get into the garage.
Yeah.
And then I'll just sort of figure it out, but no rhythm or rhyme. But then I always find I sort of crash towards some weeks. And is there a point where you should be cycling, do you think?
I think most definitely. Usually what, and this is very usual, so periodization means structuring your programming through periods over the course of, say, a year, right? Yep. And what most people do is they try and focus on something called a linear periodization. So you look at my hand, linear periodization is just everything getting harder week in, week out. Now, in a perfect world, that's great. But the problem is the body doesn't work like that perfectly, right? So typically what we do is we'll give you a focus for, say, 6 to 8 weeks, right? And you'll focus on that. It could be like, okay, the focus for the next 6 to 8 weeks is developing lower body power. So a lot of our training sessions are going to focus towards that. We'll do that for 6 weeks, and then we'll give you 1 week that's quite a lot easier, and then we'll have you focus on something else so you can keep improving. And then we might circle back to that in a couple of cycles' time. Yeah? So what I always suggest and with people is, especially if your training's a bit haphazard, is go, okay, for the next 6 weeks, I'm going to focus on bringing up my deadlift or improving my squat or something like that, yeah? And then I'll give myself a week off and I'll do things a bit lighter and then I'll move on to something else, right? Because in a perfect world, we would progress every week. But in reality, that just doesn't happen. The body adapts to it really, really, really quickly. And as soon as you start to feel, I'm not really into the workouts, I'm feeling a bit flat in the gym, I'm not really progressing, I'm not really getting stronger on these same movements, that's a perfect time for you to go, okay, it's time for me to either completely change it up or to take some time off and to deload for a couple of days. Yeah. The hardest thing for athletes and people who are so used to training is taking time off. I'm probably the same as you, right? I feel if I take 4 to 5 days off, I'm going to be like useless. But you do it, and then you come back to the gym, and you're actually stronger than when you left off, right?
Yeah.
So that's what it could be. So you could be like, okay, I'm going to spend the next 6 weeks improving my squat strength, and it could be, okay, now I'm going to spend the next 6 weeks with a focus on improving my, 2K rowing time. So working on aerobic capacity building or something like that. So you can work on sort of 4 or 5 different goals and kind of split them out every 6 weeks. And you can still squat when you're working on your row, but just most of your training is focused on that row. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Okay, so as you can see here, guys, it's muscle breakdown. And that's signaling amino acid delivery for recovery. So protein, when you eat it, gets broken down to amino acids, right?
So are we writing these dot points in that space provided?
Yeah, please
okay,
do. Yeah. So we just kind of discuss that. So protein gets broken down to amino acids. The amino acids will get shuttled into the muscle cells to help literally repair and rebuild those muscles, right? So the signal is the breakdown, the response is the amino acids and the white blood cells. So they both come in at the same time, and they literally help to patch up and repair that muscle so that muscle gets stronger, okay? Typically peaks at 48 hours post-exercise. If you guys have any experience with that, first 24 hours, you're like, well, maybe I got away with it, and then 48 hours, it's usually the worst, yeah?
100%.
And then it usually subsides at 72 for most people. That can extend more and more if you're really untrained. Like if you haven't barbell squatted for 6 months, you put yourself under a squat, you feel your hamstrings rip apart as you go down. You're like, I'm going to be sore for 7 days, So usually it's that 2 to 3 though. 2 things that really will hit DOMs. The first one is eccentric loading. Okay. So what do I mean by eccentric loading, Logan?
Eccentric loading.
Yeah. So what does eccentric mean when we talk about muscle?
Is eccentric loading? Not quite sure, to be honest with you.
Okay.
It's obviously the opposite of concentric.
Yeah. So concentric is when the muscle's shortening, when it's contracting.
Yeah.
Eccentric is when the muscle is lengthening.
Okay.
Yeah. So, for example, when you're going down in a squat, the hamstrings and the glutes are lengthening.
Yeah.
And then when you come up in a squat, the hamstrings and the quads and the glutes they shorten, they contract.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's usually eccentric loading when we're lengthening under tension. Time under tension is that causes the most amount of muscle breakdown. So if I got you to do a squat, but to lower for 4 seconds and to come up for 1 second, that's a really long eccentric loading phase. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right? Bodybuilders use eccentrics all the time. Yeah, if you've done any sort of like bodybuilding training before, it's all really slow eccentrics, really forceful concentrics. Because the concept, what bodybuilders want to do is they want to break that muscle down as much as possible. Why? So it can grow back bigger.
Yeah.
Right? Hypertrophy training is all about time under tension. So if I give you 12 bench presses, I don't want you to do 12 bench presses in 15 seconds. I want you to do 12 bench presses in 50 seconds. Really slow, really controlled, okay? So they're the two things that really cause DOMS, eccentric loads and unfamiliar exercises. Now, what are some recovery techniques? Let's just talk about this, guys. What are some recovery techniques that you guys use in the past or you think you can use to minimize DOMS?
Ice baths.
Yeah, ice can definitely help. Yep. What else?
Are we writing these down too, mate?
No, you don't have to. We're just going to talk about it. Yeah. What are some things that you might use, James?
Oh, mate, I've got a sauna. So sauna's mint.
Mate, fantastic. Have you got an infrared one, or just a normal sauna? Yeah. Can I ask how much that costs? I'm really keen on putting one in. How much?
Mate, I got an eye health one, and it was about $4,000.
Sorry, I'm writing this down. Do you recommend it?
Yeah, mate, really do. And I did a lot of research with them. So you can get obviously a lot cheaper ones for about $2,000, but they're pretty rubbish. Yeah. The eye health ones are based in Melbourne. Yeah. They obviously import them, but if anything goes wrong, you can get parts from them straight away. So it's not like you're going straight to China. And
did you install it yourself, or did you have to get someone to come and install it for you?
Mate, I've moved it like 5 times. It's literally, it just clips together like, I don't know, can you see me?
Yeah, I can see. Sorry, Logan, is this all right, mate?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're on a sauna for the gym, so I'm paying attention to this.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Can you see that, mate? It literally just clips.
Oh, it clips, yeah.
It's got, and then the roof just drops in, and mine's like a 3-person one.
Yeah, okay.
So it just opens up, turn it on, and away you go.
How good? Did you have to get any different electrical stuff for it, or does it just plug in normally to a mains, or like straight into 240
volt? And it uses stuff all because it's the far infrared one. So
that's oh mate. Okay.
Takes about 20 minutes to warm up.
Yeah.
Depending on the weather. Like I always crank it to 70 degrees, and that's the other thing. These ones go to 70.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the other ones will be just 60.
Yeah.
But it's the same. Then you can get the next model up, and it's like $8,000. And when I was doing the research, they weren't forthcoming with it, but it's exactly the same element.
Oh, really?
It's the same heating system. Just the box is nicer.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So yeah, aesthetically,
so it's like double the price.
And so 70 degrees, 20 minutes to warm up. How long do you usually spend in there when you're doing your saunas?
Mate, I've done up to an hour straight a couple of times.
Yeah.
But most of the time I do 20 minutes on, go and have a cold shower, come back in for 20 minutes or half an hour. But mate, it's obviously really good for that. But you got kids as well. It's really good to get in there, and then you can listen to like an audio book or do some sort of training or some mindfulness, just a box to get away.
Yeah.
So,
I also like the concept. I'm actually putting a studio in the backyard right now, so I should throw one of those. What's the how big is it? Like, is it like 1.5 by 1.5? What is it?
It'd be under that. It'd be 1.2 by a meter, I reckon.
And seats 3, like sitting.
Side by side, you could get 3, but I got 3 because I only wanted 2 people in there.
Yeah, okay.
Like so that if you got a 2-person one, you'd be rubbing shoulders.
Yeah, okay. Right.
So I've got a mate of mine I usually train with. He's like 110 kilos, and we sit in there fine without it feeling like it's getting a bit rapey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet, mate. Okay, I'm gonna look into that. It was my birthday.
But if you want any info, just text me because I'm pretty dialed in with them. I've wanted one for years. I've probably had that for 2 years now.
Yeah.
But they're good to deal with, those people. Eye Health Saunas, they've got a good, they're family owned. And they get a fair few like podcasts and some information. They send it all the time. They're really passionate people about it.
So sorry, just because I'm stupid. When you say 240 volts, like what does that mean? Like, did you have to get
just
like a power inverter, or you just plug straight in?
straight in, man. So it's just the same electricity that comes out of your.
Okay.
Yeah, and it doesn't cost hardly anything to run.
Yeah, because I could whack in my garage super quick. All right, awesome. All right, I'm gonna look into that. Happy days. All right. So anyway, yeah. So sauna's definitely one. Obviously, like manual therapy, so foam rolling, massages, those sorts of things are really useful as well. And you know, I guess that's pretty good. Hydration, electrolytes, potassium, and also magnesium can be quite helpful in muscle relaxation and cramps and DOMS and things like that. But usually for this, it's kind of grin and bear it. I just want to show you this one, guys. I'm not sure if you can see this.
Yep.
So this is the basic concept, as I've just said. So the first part of DOMS is the unaccustomed loads cause excessive muscle tension, resulting in microscopic damage. So literally, when we're stressing our muscles and training them, we're literally causing micro tears in our muscles, okay? After a few hours, neutrophils and macrophages, fancy words for white blood cells, accumulate around the injury site. So the muscle goes, okay, I'm injured, probably in a good way. I'm going to send white blood cells there. And then what they say is the products of that, they stimulate the free nerve endings in the muscle. So they're saying that the actual action of the white blood cells coming in to help repair the muscle stimulate the nerve endings, and that's what causes all the pain. So that's sort of the proposed mechanism behind DOMS. Okay, so that's that one. And they said, like I said, eccentric actions cause greater DOMS. How much does it last? Usually about 2 days. Is delayed onset muscle soreness. So nothing to be worried about. Obviously, it does go away with time. And also, what's also really interesting to note is as you become more trained, obviously DOMS becomes less and less frequent, but that still does not mean that you're not still making progress. A lot of clients go to me, am I making progress if I'm not getting sore every workout? And I'm like, yes, of course you are. Right? You don't have to be getting sore every workout, just be making progress. So that's a really good one, Logan, to speak to some of these people as they start to get fitter in your gym.
Yeah, 100%.
You don't have to be getting sore every time just to make progress.
Yeah, we found that as well. Yeah, 100%.
Sweet. All right, sorry guys, it's a boring one. Organizational policies and procedures. What I might do is, this is the last one. So I'm going to leave this up, guys. Just tap this away. This is just talking about like workplace health and safety, confidentiality of client information, ethical consideration, and maintaining records.